This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. This is many months into the lockdown, which is just eased in New York, but now that we've blocked out, is it 21 or 31 states that can't come here?
We haven't blocked them out, but it's they have to quarantine for 2 weeks. Of course, they can't completely enforce that, but they're watching if they see a virus cluster and they find out Joe Fratboy came from Daytona Beach, they're going to press charges is basically what they said. So that's where we're at.
Well, with 142,000 dead, over 3.5 million infected in this country.
Oh, that's an understatement probably, but
absolutely.
Yeah.
And with the idiot who just decided to put a mask on one time.
Yeah.
That would be the president.
And he's basically like people are waiting for you to say this. I mean, obviously the people that believe in science were waiting for him to say it, but he was kind of acting like it was a novel thing. Like he just came up with it, like wear a mask, socially distance. It's like, it's very frustrating.
Well, the claims are that the number of cases and deaths in some states could actually be 13 times greater than what's being reported, because a lot of people might just be dying, not being reported. And now that the Cheeto in the White House wants the reports to not go through the Center for Disease Control, but go directly to the White House, since they haven't told the truth about one single thing.
You can't trust them.
Please.
You can't trust them. And the thing is, each state has different rules on what they report. And it's interesting about which states want the numbers to be as accurate and the states that don't want the numbers to be accurate. And that's unfortunate. But one thing that's true about Florida is there's so many snowbirds and so many tourists there, and they don't have to count them when they die. So if you die in Florida, you don't die in Florida because you're from Ohio or something. So they don't count it. And already the Florida deaths are creeping up. They had 140 something today, or I think it's the biggest number. Of course, that's not touching the New York's 900 a day yet, but we'll see where this goes. It's not going in
New York, for somehow, unbelievably, New York managed to get it down. Now, yes. To be able to contain a virus in New York City, nearly impossible. And it's not as if people are smarter here, because they're not. We know how the living quarters are, very tight. But people did take to wearing masks. And they don't seem to have that ridiculous idea that my freedom is the freedom to not wear a mask so that I might be able to kill you without getting my hands dirty. Well, if they're going to kill you in New York, they don't mind getting their hands dirty. Let's face facts.
Yeah. I think, Lydia, one thing is New York, a lot of people died in New York. And so there, if you know someone that died or suffered a lot, that has an impact. And so even there were some deniers that were just basically like, oh, my friend just died. And that's usually a wake-up call. I think that was a factor also.
Well, and it's not over. It's not over here. It's not over anywhere. And it's not going to be over for a while. And vaccine, and then we have the anti-vaxxers, which, I don't know. I never get a flu shot because I don't trust. Once I knew that Donald Rumsfeld made $5 million off of Tamiflu, I never got a flu shot anyway.
So I talked to my brother who works for the CDC, and that's an argument that the anti-vaxxers make all the time, is that it's big pharma and it's all CDC is answering to them. They've basically been bought and sold. My brother says it's completely inaccurate. Big pharma hates vaccines. Vaccines are not a medication that you have to take regularly. The big money is in pills and stuff like that. It's not a shot that you get once in your life, once every 5 years, even once a year. There's not huge money in that compared to basically maintenance. And so that's his argument about it. Of course, all right. The China flu. I'm very happy that Nancy Pelosi started calling it the Trump virus. I mean, look, this has larger implications to me because he is germ warfare on the morale, the intelligence, the individual, the entire country. This is a living bacterial infection. We need to be vaccinated against this asshole. It's a virus.
But he's a bacterial infection.
He's a bacterial.
He should be douched out. How do you douche a douche, though? I mean, come on.
Well, if we're going to talk about Nancy Pelosi one-liner jabs, whether you like her or not. She went down the other last week, went down this whole list of like the virus is a hoax and the Russian thing's a hoax. And she's like, there's only one hoax. That's you.
Exactly. Well, and this is what I don't get. Look, he goes between, sucking China's dick and then trying to kick him in the ass. I mean, for instance, how many patents did his favorite daughter, Ivanka, get from China? Like 19 patents from China.
Yeah.
In the last year, 8 tons of cabinets and tables imported from China. Oh, yeah. Manufacturing in America? I don't think so. To the Trump Hotel and to his L.A. Gulf.
So, what's his motivation here? I mean, is he trying to provoke a war? He's trying to get a distraction going because his numbers are down?
He's provoke a war with China. I mean, one minute he loves him, the next minute he hates him.
It's all over the place.
They're getting rid of the diplomats, and what are they doing there? I mean, he doesn't know what he's fucking doing.
But let's talk about how irresponsible the Republican Senate is, because I still view Trump as more of a distraction, and of course Mitch McConnell.
Well,
he's just pushing through. They're gutting everything they can possibly fucking gut. The real
evil has been there longer than Trump. That's for sure. Exactly.
So this is interesting about Mitch McConnell, and I always like to bring this one up. His ex-wife, he's now got this.
And who even would want to marry this motherfucker?
Well, I always like these second wives of the Republican senators. These kind of like ambitious Washington, like Elizabeth Dole's the second, like just basically power hungry.
Right,
so basically, the first wife teaches women's studies at Smith, and so Mitch was known to be.
No wonder he divorced her.
Well,
or she divorced him.
Or either way, Mitch was known to be a more quote unquote moderate Republican until that divorce. It seems like he's governing out of spite just to kind of screw her. And then the kids from there, they're kind of like, Dad. They kind of hate her.
Yeah, but what about the new wife, the dragon lady?
Well, she's
worth how much?
He's worth about $22.5 million,
and she's worth about $24 million.
But when you hear about politicians worth like $20 million,
why are they deciding what the rest of us poor people should have or should be doing, or what the minimum wage is? All right, look, thanks for the $600 occasionally every week in the stimulus check. Now you want to reduce that to like $100 for people? You know what? The protests that we just saw, wait till they come to roast your fat ass because they're hungry. I'm not saying anything, Mitch.
So yeah, they're
fatten up the beast, because you know what?
They're giving
going to be hungry.
The horse to their donors, and they're giving huge breaks to the elite rich, and they press the regular guy. But that's one thing. What's up with these fucking stick in the mud judges they're putting in that have these life career positions that are just basically like, I want you to be miserable forever. Like, you can't have fun. And
all right, well, hang on.
What's up with those?
I had a bit of fun today when I saw that 4 previous attorney generals want to go after that fat fuck Barr. Like 4 of the previous attorney generals actually they're saying, hey, we got to investigate. This is just there has never been corruption this obscene.
I'm telling you, not to make a reference to the disease, Epstein-Barr. There's definitely a connect. Well, there is a connection because Barr's dad got Epstein's first school gig at Dalton School in the Upper East Side.
All right, we're now getting conspiratorial.
No, it's actually true. It's actually true. It's not a conspiracy.
Well, you need to be a little clearer, Tim, because that was just a riff. Epstein, the murdered pedophile.
Epstein,
his first
teaching gig
that he had no qualifications,
no degrees for, was teaching.
Installed. No,
Barr's dad got him the gig. Barr's dad also happened to write this kind of fantasy sci-fi children's sex slave trade intergalactic book.
Well, okay.
It's like, what is going on? No, that's true.
Not to tie the conspiracy together. Today, there was an article in Raw Story that said, what about Trump's, I'd never heard this before, donations to Scientology?
I know nothing about that.
Well, we're going to investigate that some more. Let's talk about what's really happening, what we know the true so-called facts on. Sending federal militia to Portland. Yeah. Okay. First of all, it is unconstitutional, but Trump doesn't read. He never read the Constitution. What does he care? Sending Ben into Chicago today. New York is not going to stand by that. It is unconstitutional to send in these untagged, vans unmarked,
That's terrifying.
Beating up veterans.
Beating up moms.
Well, let's talk about the wall of moms.
Yeah, the wall of moms.
Wall of moms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Republicans, it's like states' rights, unless it's not convenient, or it's pro-life, but you got to go back to work and die.
I think their sperm is so precious that even when it's just residing in a woman's uterus, that must be life. In the meantime, there's a wall of moms going, don't shoot, get out, leave us alone. For the most part,
500 of them.
For the most part, these are peaceful protests. And you know what? Anarchists, if there were anarchists, there'd be a lot more damage being done. The problem is there's not enough anarchists, if you ask me. All of the anarchists, quote unquote, are on the other side of the fucking fence. They just don't call themselves anarchists. They call themselves freedom fighters. They call themselves megabillies.
But the moms were gassed. And that was the day after the sons and daughters were gassed. So
beat up a vet who admits he's a vet, put him in the hospital.
Oh, that one. I saw that one.
Some moms, put people in unmarked van.
So this is like
welcome,
but it also didn't help that the union head of the police department in Chicago, the police department in Chicago is a huge Trumper. So that's not that's not helping anything.
Well, look, I mean, Chicago is a unique. I think Chicago is more unique than any other city because it's always been. They all have been incredibly corrupt. That it is incredibly segregated. It is incredibly racist. Police brutality, the divide is so wide. And let's go back to what the real issue is. Who let all these guns out on the street? And if you don't think it was the American government who wants people to be killing each other, you're wrong. Well, they do want you to do their dirty work.
It's interesting that the NRA's whole thing is about basically like you have that right so you can protect yourself from a militia for your own government. It's interesting that they're not coming out now.
That's the thing is, the Second Amendment, it was meant to protect the individual and the communities against violence committed against them by the government. So we should be executing our Second Amendment. I am not anti-gun. I just think the wrong people have too many of the guns. And I mean, it's too late now. You can't take the guns away. How are you going to get all the guns away? But if you don't think that it was kind of a plot to put guns where they are in the hands of people that are desperate, that are poor, that don't give a shit anymore, the problem is don't target the next victim in line. There are better targets. I'm not going to name them right now. I'm just saying.
So
just my opinion.
So let's.
But that does bring us to the most ridiculous. Every day it's something more ridiculous. Her name is Ghislaine. I call her Ghislaine because that's what it looks like. Maxwell.
It does.
It does look like Ghislaine. Yeah. Ghislaine. Maxwell. All right, Trump. Now, some people are saying this is sending a message because he said it twice, but he repeats himself constantly because he can't put a full sentence together without. Wishes her, pervert, predator, madam to a pedophile. I wish her well. I wish her well.
Yeah.
Now, the one reason I don't think he would pardon her is, first of all, I don't think, in spite of all the crimes he's committed, I really don't believe that Trump is a pedophile because we know he likes models a little bit kind of on the other side of looking that great, and strippers and go-go dancers, etc. And yes, some of his friends might be indicted, but she's a woman. So therefore, I don't think he would commute her sentence. I'm just saying, I don't get the feeling.
If she's can live for the
year before
the trial, exactly.
The thing is, I think that even if she wanted to reveal everything that she knew, there's got to be someone somewhere in the justice system that's going to say, I'm afraid, sister, that's just not enough.
It's amazing how all these things are coming to a head on an election year, and I kind of can't wait, but I'm also, oh boy, it's like a horror movie. You know something's going to happen.
Well, I know it is truly a horror movie. We're in lockdown. There is a pandemic. People are going to get poorer by the day. Protests were great because they were about social injustice. They were about, this cannot continue with the police brutality. There's no jobs. Many places aren't going to open. Send the kids to school. Go ahead. Let them get sick and bring it home to everybody else. Thank you, Betsy Idiot DeVos. They're just the dumbest woman ever to open her fucking mouth. And this is where we're at right now. So in times like this, all we can do is introduce our next guest, who's going to tell us about just how hard some times have been in the past. But you know what? You got to do what I do, and you have to. Good luck. I hope you can. So you quarantine. So you're in lockdown. You can see one or two people. They better be the best people you can see. You better become your best friend. You better get a vibrator, ladies. I'm telling you, it will solve the problem. This could go on and on. The same way that wars went on and on in the past. I mean, people went to wars. They didn't come back from years if they came back. We are basically in a war. We are fighting. We have to fight a war for democracy, for our individuality, for our very fucking health, for a paycheck. Don't think Mitch McConnell's going to give up any of his bloody fucking millions. How dare you? And you know what? Let's stop electing people that make $1 million a fucking year. I mean, what do they know about us? They know nothing, and they don't fucking care. They don't care. Now, I'd like to introduce Zoe Hansen. This is the Lydian Spin with Tim Dahl, Lydia Lunch, and our guest, Zoe Hansen.
Beelzebub by Zoe Hansen. You know, when you're so strung out that sex and violence become one, and upping the ante is the only option. So you do. And your whole life becomes consumed with constructing each experience to the fine details and infusing more violence, thus creating a disturbing effect until there's nothing left. The ultimate is at hand, death. But you've been through that, and you keep coming back from the comforting tunnel with the light at the end. You keep coming back, jolted into the life you're so dying to die from. But not even the predators, pimps, and scumbag boyfriends care. So you don't either. But that's when reality becomes a carnival, filtered in white strobe lights. Beelzebub dwarfs rips at your clothes, and you cry and cry for the innocence that's lost and the pain that you just can't feel any longer, until you look into a funhouse mirror and you see you are Beelzebub, and you've been chasing your own fucking tail for 2 decades. Or has it been 2 hours?
This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and my special guest, who I like to consider her my wife, Zoe Hansen. Now, Zoe, we go back actually farther than we actually go back in some ways. Because when I met you was actually at a reading that Jerry Stahl was doing up the street from where I was staying in Brooklyn. And it was based on this book we were both in called the Heroin Chronicles. And I walked in, I kind of busted in because Jerry didn't know I was staying up the street. And I had an article, I had a story in there, and so did you. And there was a heinous Dick Manitoba. And at the time, and now again,
nemesis, and now mine, in fact.
Exactly. A person, I'm not even a namer, and Dick said, "Oh, do you know her?" Not even introducing me to you, I think. And I said, "Oh, yes, I do, and how are you?" And it was somebody that talked a lot of bullshit who had never done anything and accused me of stuff I didn't even do, but it didn't matter because she, who at the time was your good friend, brought us together.
That's right. And that's right. And now I don't talk to her. We
don't talk to her. And you know what?
Yeah.
She tried to make reparations, and it was kind of a false start because... But anyway, instantly, we had a connection.
You bonded. I was around when that happened, and Lydia was telling me, I feel like I've known this person my whole fucking life.
No, it was great. She did bring us together, and then you did a workshop.
Which you helped, and she helped to organize a women's writers workshop, which was great.
It was fantastic, and you really helped.
Well, and I had to actually confront somebody that accused me of shit I did not do for more than 30 years. And
can
was
see it.
for some reason I was just the basis of all her insecurity. Like I was the hatred because she knew she wasn't me. But it brought us together, which was amazing. You did a reading. I popped in and did a reading under the Jerry Stahl Heroin Chronicles. And then we did a reading the next night at St. Mark's Books with Eric Bogosian as
Which
well.
was amazing. That
and
was
at that point, we
fantastic.
just bonded.
That was it. No, and then you graciously offered to help me with editing of my book.
Going down
which
in Gotham.
at the time was, I was so focused, so dedicated to writing and getting this book out, and I needed the direction, and you gave me that. You were fantastic. And it shows in the pieces that...
Well, and also then, that's when I was part of my nomadic phase, and the Roxy Hotel in New York offered me a residency to live and work there. And then I organized a series of events with Weasel Walter and Tim Dahl doing improvisational music, and mostly women reading.
Yeah.
Bibi
That was
Hansen,
fun
Zoe
times.
Hansen, and
It was
myself.
great.
Those were good times.
And that really, I think, helped you to develop what you were writing, because
Absolutely.
we were
And
writing
perform.
and performing for every 2 weeks for a few months.
It was fantastic. Yeah. No, those were some good times. Learning creatively, that was everything. And, having to prepare the pieces and be there, and we pulled together a big audience. We did very well there.
It was a
a
really
thing.
great experience. Oh, so look, as somebody that has often and always curated spoken word shows since I began doing them, it's very important for me to present multi-generational true stories. And I thought it was really effective between you, me, and Bibi Hansen. Bibi Hansen being one of the youngest Warhol superstars. We have just a few age differences, a few years between us.
Right.
But the experiences are kind of similar.
They are, yeah.
And I'm really a promoter of true life, real stories, especially written by women.
Absolutely. And the way you treated my story was wonderful. You were so accepting, you were understanding, you knew it, you knew the gig, you weren't freaked out by it, because, that story, there's some...
Well, let's just
Really is
illustrate.
accepting to
It gets dark.
independence, and people are willing to fight their way, particularly women. And if the women aren't tough enough, she's going to challenge you.
sure.
And you're one of her
And
closest
if you are
ones.
tough
Sure.
enough, and if you are striving to go beyond just surviving and to overcome, I am going to be your strongest ally.
You absolutely were. No, it was great. And continue. And then we did the Coven.
We did the
which
coven.
was-
Why don't you describe what the coven was?
That was sort of born out of Brooklyn and where you lived on Union Street.
Appropriately named.
The Coven with Jasmine and
Jasmine
we were
Hurst,
a
who
bunch
we've
of
had on here.
women would sit around, and we sort of felt it was a group of strong women and a coven and a witchcraft sort of theme background.
And then we did performances, public performances, where we brought various
you
women.
brought a bunch of people.
And we would we didn't do that many performances, but we did some performances.
We got kicked out of the Soho House.
Well,
which
that's
was
no great
memorable.
accomplishment.
Oh, I remember. Didn't we
Oh,
have, we
for
had a
throwing
dinner
a
with,
glass.
She broke a glass.
Soho
Big
House.
deal.
Is that the hotel?
But we would do.
It was this place down at the bottom of 14th Street, like in the
Oh, okay.
meat
I'm
bag,
mistaken
very
for the
pretentious,
But
Soho.
bollocky.
what the coven public performances were just explaining the different parts of what witches, quote unquote, are, the history of female abuse by the patriarchy, why witches were condemned, because basically they knew about herbs, abortifactants, and sex.
Mother Nature and just
Nature,
living
elementals,
off the land.
and then Jasmine and I, and you also, because you read ruins, but then we would do cold
Read the
readings of the
room.
room. I think that was very informative.
It was fantastic.
And now that I'm back in Brooklyn, we will continue doing the coven readings.
Because I remember you guys would have, and Lydia would be like, "Well, this is for us. You can come over afterwards." And I'd hang out with you, the ones that are hanging out.
By the way, my new landlord actually came to one of the coven meetings, and he's like, "I love all your witches." I'm like, "Is your son a budding witch?" And he goes, "I think he might be."
Well,
That's
my
so
first
cool.
impression when I was hanging out afterwards, I'm like, this reminds me of when I hang out with military boys. And no matter
Love
what,
it.
no matter what their story is, there's kind of a code of what the fuck
There is a code.
you've been through and what you've had
Well,
to
an
experience.
incredible acceptance.
And what the hard stuff you've had to witness and endure, and then the actual support that goes along with it. That's basically
There is an unspoken code,
it's
right?
critical, it's hard, but it's also not judgmental in the
Well,
sense
I mean,
that,
look, the coven is very accepting of
There you go.
people that are ready to explore the further possibilities.
accepting but
that-
critical.
But
too.
also understand the background of witchcraft, paganism,
Abuse,
some
trauma, getting over it, and
trauma.
using your power. All witchcraft really is, because I don't even like the term, is knowing how to focus. All religions have icons, they have they have like the altar, they have their symbols. It's like my focus
To
has
help
always
you
been
focus.
acute. Sometimes people just have these symbols or sacraments so that they can better focus on focusing their energy. And that's part of what the coven is really about. It's like when you have a group of women together, it's really just to rejoice and embrace
and building your energies.
and building the energy and
energies.
just encouraging. I mean, it's a very positive experience. And women need to have communities. We'll call it a coven, call it what you will. Women, we don't have sports, we don't have war, we need covens. So, what interested me about your writing and not only your life, Zoe, was how much early trauma you had. You were born unto fairly well-to-do parents, a father
London.
who was a writer, mother who was the worst that one could expect, a jealous psychopath. You know, as usual in familial abuse situations, it's what it is.
It is.
And
yeah.
I mean,
it was awful.
and-
it was bad.
And I think we need to talk a little bit about what mother abuse feels like, because I mean, so much of what I've talked about is like what father abuse feels like, whether it's neglect or trauma or abuse.
It's a
very
different result.
different thing.
It's a
You
different result.
can't. You never expect a mother to be like that. And as a mother myself now, I
Which you
find
are
that,
so. I mean, one thing I have to say is you are an amazing mother to a child who is amazing.
that kid will always be everything. And the fact that my mother was so awful, I look at this little being now, and I could never hurt him the way she hurt me and my brother, and physically and mentally. And to this day, she's just awful. She's 83 years old, and she's still.
Well, it's almost
Well, you know who your real mother is.
Well, it's almost impossible to sever the chain of abuse from one generation to the next.
Very hard.
It rarely happens.
What's
in
so
fact.
amazing about
Very, very
Zoe
hard.
is that she became so kind and so gracious and so elegant in the face of this atrocity. And I really love you for that, darling, because you
Well,
are
thank you.
really
Thank
such
you.
a kind and gentle
Thank
person.
you.
Not that I haven't seen you
Oh,
go,
yeah.
but
Oh,
I have
yeah.
seen your patience, which is incredible.
Have you seen the full-on?
Oh, I've
Zoe?
seen it go from 0 to 200, but you know what? Only after much pushing from other people.
Really.
So you're in London at this time, right? And then
You're
then
15.
At 15, and you
And a heroin addict.
and heroin
Already
15.
because
Yeah.
the situation was
Heroin,
so
okay,
dreadful.
that's heavy, and then
Oh,
and
yeah.
then you're having to subsidize that on your own.
Well, I was working.
Yeah.
I was working as a hairstylist at this incredible place called Antenna
In London.
in London, in Kensington.
At 15, 16?
15,
And then you moved to New York at 18.
17.
Holy shit!
To
And
get as far away from the abusers as possible.
I actually went to work as a hairstylist at this place on Thompson Street called Golov's Boy. And Debbie Mazer was also working
thread.
there. She was an assistant there, and I came in as a stylist from London at 17. And I was teaching people how to do dreadlocks and hair extensions, and it was like such a nightmare. But
But a nightmare that brought you
Debbie
to New
was
York.
there, and I was like a drug addict and strung out, and dealing at 17 with trying to pay the rent and being in a city that I had no clue about, and how diabolical it can be.
New York, you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, how diabolical your situation
right.
created
right.
it to be.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad.
But tell us about turning that around. Because it was quite a few hard and ugly years for such a beautiful young lass as yourself. Decades.
But the sex industry was the best thing I ever did. That was my favorite
People don't
part of it.
understand how that can actually be beneficial to some women.
For someone coming from where I came from and being a heroin addict, working on the street, being
Terrible
a
life.
sex worker.
Right. Did you have a pimp, or were you working
Oh
independently?
no, I was working in brothels. It was fantastic. I was
Right.
making
But wait,
tons
when you got
of
off
money.
the street, when you went to work in brothels,
But I was doing the street just in and out, like here and there. But
You need a little
working
money.
in brothels was amazing. You're making so much money. You're surrounded by like fierce women. And it gave me an opportunity to get clean. And I did. One day I just stopped, and that was it. And
then you
I got on a
graduated from
methadone
you
program.
graduated from there into running your own brothels.
Then I opened up a brothel on Park Avenue and 21st Street.
And I have to say, that's pretty fantastic from a gutter level exile.
I saved
kind
my
of
money.
punk.
I was always the number one girl. I
You
was
have
always
admin-
really.
You have admin and logistical skills, so why not fucking apply that? 'Cause that's huge.
It was a great move.
And clearly, you could communicate with the women because that's a lot of stuff to manage.
Well, when you have one brothel and you're being targeted by the police and they keep coming and busting, I opened up another place, which was just a massage place on the next block to give the girls an option
Of
when
massage
when they weren't having their period, they could then go and work over there and give massages
What
and
years
hand
was
clever.
jobs.
what period of time was this?
No pun
in?
intended.
This was 2001.
Actually, that was right before the sex industry. There was still
no,
a few,
96 was when it really kind of with Giuliani, but then
Yeah.
Right, but
So you had
but
more
I'm still,
stealth.
you could still run a brothel, you could still
I
have
was-
a house, and prostitution
well-
actually was still when women are running it and
It was a
running
problem.
brothels.
It was a problem. And I did have to get out at one point. I opened up 5 altogether throughout Manhattan.
So amazing.
And the money was so good. And the women were, it was just a very perfect time to be in that industry. And I was married at the time, and the person that I was married to died. And that was a whole big thing unto itself. But I was, completely clean, making shitloads of money. And I thought it would go on forever. And then 9/11 happened, and it just ripped the city
I
apart.
want to talk a little bit about how I don't even like the word prostitution, but I think it's a valuable service because, first of all, it can supply men with something they can't get at home that should be guilt-free. And I feel that it's an honest relationship in the sense that you need money, they need something they can't get at home. There's
Yeah,
no
of
bullshit.
course.
It's a limited time period, and everyone's going to be happy in that situation when you're running it yourself.
Right.
It's when you're being run into prostitution, that's where the problem is. When you're being sex trafficked, that's where the problem is. There's a very big difference, and I want people to understand there is a difference between owning you selling sex for money than being sold for money because of your sex. And also, it was a very different time. To me, the main point is this. If there are needs that people need met and you can put a price on it that is agreeable to both, there is no problem as long as you own it.
Right, of course.
There are just some needs you don't
that's
want to bring to
Europe.
your wife.
Europe are doing that.
Some needs you do not want to bring home to the wife. And I don't blame you. And you know what? The wives probably don't want it.
And they don't. That's the thing. That's
And
what
why should
keeps
they? And
us
the
in
thing
business.
is, nobody is responsible for satisfying anybody else's lust.
You're
and if you
right.
can pay for that, why should you not? I am only dissatisfied with the lack of brothels for women to go to.
That is a thing, but in actual fact,
But then again,
Heidi
women mainly
Fleiss,
have a lot easier time.
She opened up one a number of years ago, but it just
Well, it's not so common in the United
Women
States.
don't use it.
The only country that really has a large male brothel scene for women, not for gay men, is Japan.
really.
yeah.
Understandable.
And
Yes.
because the men end up having these younger mistresses, it's for them. But it's older housewives. But that's not the only demographic. The other demographic is, and this is some Japanese shit, are female sex workers. They're exploited, and so they have to counterbalance it by going and paying a young boy and then giving them all these gifts. So you have and you see billboards in I think it's Shinjuku or one of the Tokyo neighborhoods. It's like Azawa, the hunk of the month, and some young
Right.
Japanese boy with a Fabio haircut.
But anyway, let's get back to the brothels. At one point, you had 5 brothels you were running. And that was successful for that period.
Very
What was the end of
successful.
that?
The end of it, well, I sort of felt things dropped out around 2002, 2003. It became really hard. And then I also,
Hooked
I
up?
got pregnant.
Yeah, okay.
So that
by the
was
way, That
changes
that.
things.
That's
Changes
when
things.
I had to close down everything because I knew then a bust would mean the end
And
of
what's
everything.
interesting is
So-
you were clean when you were running the brothels.
Yes,
and you'd have to
I
be
was.
because it's a very,
I
you have
was.
to maintain a lot of,
Yeah.
it's a business.
Yeah, totally.
And
That's
it's ridiculous
100%.
that it is not a legal business because people should be able
Of course,
to pay for
of
what
course.
they want in
Yeah.
a sexual vein that is consensual.
So Zoe, can I ask you a personal question? You're progressive in terms of how you view these things, and your son's a teenage boy. Have you ever had a conversation with him about this stuff?
It had to happen.
He knows. He knows
Right.
pretty much everything. I mean, Lydia knows.
I've known him since
He's
he was
an unbelievable child. And yeah, I've never hidden who I am from anyone. It's like, this is it. It can be nasty and then it can be all right. But my kid gets it and we're so close.
So how do you deal, I kid coming from divorce, and you have obviously your issues with your ex, and yet your son is biologically half your ex. And so it's a complicated one when you insult
Good
that person in front of them
point,
because that's half of them.
Absolutely.
And they take that
It's
personally.
hard. It's
Well, no,
hard.
wait, hang on. What was interesting in this situation is the child had to become the adult.
Yes.
Because he was dealing with
And
somebody
still
that was
is.
still emotionally fragile, which was Zoe, and somebody that was a psychopathic maniac with egomaniac with an insecurity complex is what they call most alcoholics. I mean, that's what he was. So the child, and even when I don't remember how old he was when I met him, maybe 8, 10.
Right.
He was already the adult.
Yeah.
And he
grow
already
fast.
understood about past lives. He already understood
did.
about psychic phenomena, witchery, and all of this. He understood there were other realms.
Yeah, totally. He
and
does.
he's a very
He does.
pure soul, in spite of the fact
It's
that both of his
unusual.
parents were highly polluted. One by egomania
Absolutely.
and one by just the trauma of
Absolutely.
existence.
Yep, absolutely. No, it's incredible what's happened today and the way it's turned out.
And what's incredible is also what you did, which is what our generation has tried to do, is stop the abuse. Is not carry on in the family tradition,
It
which
can
is not
be
only,
done.
it never starts with the mother or our father. It goes so far back, this kind of abuse.
That's
There is no
absolutely-
guide for
yeah.
how to parent. There is no guide for this. Look, sex is not wrong. Don't do it in public. Don't let anybody do anything to you don't want done. I mean, it's quite that simple, but nobody has ever told any of us that. And most abusive sexual situations make you feel that sex is wrong or bad because it feels good, but it's wrong and you know it. So we came together under the auspice of an enemy of mine who was your good friend and who's now an enemy of both of us,
And Jerry.
and Jerry Stahl,
yeah.
who I'd known for quite a long time. I mean, Jerry Stahl and I went on many spoken word tours together. I just find him the most hilarious spoken word. I mean, he says everything about men nobody wants to admit. And it was Karen Finley that told me I needed to meet Jerry. And Jerry and Ben Stiller came to one of my shows in LA. I think I might have been living in Pittsburgh, which is where Jerry was from at the time. And just loved Jerry instantly as well. So Jerry and I were touring, and we've gone on spoken word tours. We've done a lot of shows. And I mean, what I love about performing with him is, again, he's not only hilarious, he says things about himself and about men that most other people just couldn't stand to admit. See, we tell things about ourselves, but it's not necessarily comedic, although we do laugh, but it's things that have to be told about our condition. Jerry tells things that no man would want to admit. We have to admit what we've been through, and also how we're not flattened by it. We have not been squashed. We are stubbornly surviving to tell the tales that need to be told. So what about going down in Gotham? What's the status of that? I mean, are you still working on that? How was it just the process? Basically, going down in Gotham is Zoe's real life story about getting kicked out at 15 by a writer. A father was a writer and a jealous mother, becoming a heroin addict, coming to New York, stylist, hairstylist, prostitution on the streets, into brothels, owning brothels, and then surviving beyond that. So if the writing of that, which seemed, I mean, and I loved working with you on that.
It was so much fun, and I love the idea of that book, and it's gone through so many incarnations throughout the years.
But it must have been beneficial to you just to get it out, whether it comes out or not.
And it is. It will always continue to be. I just found with that book, I got to a point where in my life, I couldn't write anymore, and I didn't know how to get it together.
Because you weren't there anymore.
I wasn't.
And also, you weren't where you needed to be.
And what I was writing
weren't
was,
need to be.
it was disjointed and it didn't make sense anymore.
Okay, and I'm going to compare it to Paradoxia. I wrote the last chapter first because I was already over all of that, which is a very bizarre way to start the end chapter. And then I went back. And at the time you were writing Going Down in Gotham, you were getting the stories down, but you weren't where you are now.
Right.
So you weren't really in the perspective. It was more of you had to purge that.
It's true. That's absolutely, yeah.
Because there was no conclusion yet because you were still in a trauma zone.
Yeah, completely.
And honey, that's what my house was for. rescuing you from that.
It was. No, it was fantastic. But, just getting the space between it and moving across the fucking universe to be over here and away from Jake. And it's sort of...
Jake is your son.
It's just given me so much to think about and what I've done with my life and where I am right now and what I could possibly do.
Well, and also, it's not that easy raising in the best or the worst conditions a 16 to now 18, a 0 to 18-year-old child who was the father for a while of the family, who turned out to be an incredible kid, and running bars and running fashion lines and writing stuff and performing. I mean, you did an amazing job.
Thank you, because no one really sees that. They don't see what goes on in between life, and they see,
don't know how much hard work
they see sound bites and they hear things and they think
also,
they know.
You did a lot of work supporting.
No one knows.
You did a lot of work emotionally supporting somebody who I consider was a grand fucking loser. That would be Dick Manitoba, who was a talentless cunt from the get-go, who only sang other people's songs. Basically should have been a wrestling manager, although I challenged him to spoken word and he never fucking cop up to it. But you spent a lot of time in the service of your son, tolerating his psychosis.
That was it, 17
And people
years.
have no idea what that is. And you did it for your son.
Of course.
You didn't do it
100%.
because basically you were in a masochistic situation with a maniac that had no right to put you in that position.
Right, it was rough. And I know I also contributed to the blow up. I made that happen.
Well,
I needed to make that happen to get out. That I had
Wait,
to.
you're talking about the final blow up.
The final.
Well, it's
final blow up was what?
When communication gets so bad, resentment builds up, and it comes out in extreme forms.
It just became...
This is the nature of relationships. Starts out really hot, psychotically good. Then it graduates into really good. Then it could graduate into platonic love and intimacy. But then when it gets into resentment, disgust, abuse, it's over. And people just, for some reason, in your case, you couldn't get out because you wanted to stay there for your son.
When you have a kid, where are you supposed to...
and what are you supposed to do?
And financially, that wasn't possible at the time.
And when you were contributing to his career and his
then
bar,
it was all okay. Yeah, it was.
I mean, that's bad. The position many women find themselves in, is that
they
are trapped financially to live under the auspice of a fucking
But yet,
maniac.
I walked into that relationship with $250,000, and it was gone within a year.
Okay.
So
gone within a year. Why?
Yeah, well, because I spent it with him.
Yeah,
threw it away. I
wasted it on him.
Cars, vacations.
You guys live large, but you're from the generation that and this was a big issue, especially with you coming here, is that you had a rent controlled apartment.
I
in East
never
Village.
had that.
That was in his name.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's something he could hold over you, and because that's.
Oh no, that was his.
I know that, but you need a place to live.
Oh, thank you.
I mean,
exactly.
where is any woman supposed to go when a man holds the financial reins and they're a maniac?
As Me Too is coming down, this bounce off. It was in the papers.
No,
it was
I remember.
A thing.
It was in the Post or was it in the Daily News?
No, people don't understand how hard it is to escape.
No one.
How hard it is to escape psychodynamic, violently or psychologically violent, abusive situation when the man holds the financial reins, who you've been catering to in the service of raising your son. You can't just, because it takes more than guts and balls to go, all right, that's it, I'm done, I'm out.
I love the way people kept saying, just leave, just leave.
And where are you supposed to go with no money when you
would leave. I'd wash toilets. I'd just leave. Yeah,
where you left was to my house, and I would have let you move right in.
And you did. And you did.
Because where are you supposed to go when you've been in the service of somebody else, and especially to your son? And I understand that dilemma. It's fucking horrifying. Anyway, you're out of that now. And look how lovely you are.
It's good to be.
And what's the next phase, doll? What's the next phase?
Feel the breath of air and to just be able to breathe and be at peace, and not have that, that anxiety. But it's also being with Jerry and out here, and he's really, he's so good for me.
And we're talking about Jerry Stahl. And so how did you meet Jerry, actually?
Through you.
Through me, and I met him through Jerry Finley.
This is the weird thing. We can't figure out how he got in touch with me to contribute to the book in the first place.
Okay, and that's the Heroin Chronicles.
Because he was like, Lydia put you in touch. I was like,
No, I didn't. I didn't know you then.
So that is the
That's
big
a mystery.
That
Okay,
was from the goddess.
Well, okay, so the Heroin Chronicles is a series of short stories published by Akashic Press that also publishes Paradoxy and Will Work for Drugs, my book, 2 of my books. It was a series of short stories by various contributing authors about their heroin experience. And when Jerry contacted me, I'd only done heroin two times, but it led to me leaving Los Angeles after a stalker chased me down with that bag of whitey that I thought was cocaine.
It's a great story.
Oh, boy.
It's called Ghost Town. We all know about it, and that was My Lover the Killer. But that's what brought us together. But who knows how Jerry?
So,
but you had your eye on Jerry.
phase-
You had your eye on Jerry Stall for a while.
20 years.
But look,
like even
look,
Deborah
as
said,
much
you
as
told
we love-
me years ago that you were going to be with him. I was like, I knew. I just
Do
knew.
I say that again?
I told Deborah like 20 years ago, I'm going to be with that guy. Like that is the guy.
Well, and I want to illustrate this. Look, for some reason we love music. We love rock music, all kinds of music. But it is really words that somehow have this magical, mystical
will
pull
always be
to us.
And I love that.
Because there's
I love
so
the
few
words.
things
Yeah.
that really penetrate. And when they do, they penetrate.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that music can't do that. Of course it does. But it's a different language. And that language for us is words.
It is. No, it's something I love, and I like to read them. I like to hear them.
Who are some of the writers that inspired you coming from a family where your father was a writer?
I love...
And that was in a time when we actually had time to read.
There were. I mean, I love the Beats, and I love Herbert Huncke. That to me,
And by the
his
way,
simplicity.
Nobody knows about Herbert Huncke.
I know,
And that's
it
a
kills
piece
me.
I did with Grid, Tim Doll's band.
I'm a huge fan
Talking
of
about
Herbert
Herbert
Huncke. I
Huncke,
talk
yeah.
about him all the time.
He was the
Love
original
him.
beat, by the way. Before Burroughs and Ginsberg, it was Huncke.
Burroughs looked up to him and used him as a
Huncke
character.
gave Burroughs his first shot.
Yeah. I used to go see Huncke read on Avenue D.
Now, was he in the Chelsea Hotel when you were there?
He was in the Chelsea, but I was gone so much of the time and out of my fucking mind. But I would go see him read and talk to him there. But when I was back,
And by the way, the Grateful Dead, I respect them for nothing other than supporting Herbert Huncke in the last years of his life.
nice! I didn't know that.
They did, yes, they did.
Wow. Okay.
So who else besides like Huncke, the Beats? Henry Miller,
Of course,
my favorite.
You know, the genre that sort of.
And it's strange because it's mostly white dead men that inspired us.
Oddly, I love Bukowski. I love it. It's simple. I like simple, real stories.
What about
that just
Bukowski? Because people are
spell
always
it.
like, when women like Bukowski, they don't get it.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because Bukowski's great for teenage boys. It's like boisterous.
It is. But there's
braggadom,
also
ugly
there's
man,
a lot
hot
of,
chicks.
But there's a Post Office is one of the most beautifully
Factotum.
simple books ever written. I just love how I don't know. Maybe I'm a
It's
teenage
always,
boy.
Well,
I
and
love
again,
it.
here is a hideously ugly man writing poetry or short stories, getting beautiful women. Can you imagine a hideously ugly woman writing great stories and poetry and getting a hot man?
Never.
Anyway, just in the
Never.
power of words.
Never.
Power of words on some of the psyches. Bukowski.
Hey, I would have done him for free.
That's the only difference
Warts
between
and
us.
all.
It's the only
I
difference
like
I've
him
noticed
like
between
that.
you. You like the ugly ones. You go after the ugly men. I'm not going to go any further with that, but you do. And you know what? It's a mercy fuck, babe. You're a sister of mercy fucks. Are you not my sister? My sister wife of mercy fucks. Honey, you fuck all the ones I won't.
That's right, babe.
Somebody's got to
But
do
I
it.
gave
Hey,
up. It's like curtains now.
Oh,
It's
well.
like I'm done.
You got your own man, and he's quite hot, actually.
He is.
And when I have told Jerry Stahl for years how hot he is, he just shirks it off. I'm like,
He's no idea.
you know what? He's
No
got
clue.
no idea.
No.
Women have run after him, sometimes with kitchen knives, but that's a different story. What now, babe? So now you've resettled in L.A. and resettled again in L.A. You came-
Resettled and
you're in the place you should be.
I'm actually really interested in ASMR.
Do
which-
describe exactly what that is for those that
ASMR
don't know.
is autonomous sensory meridian response, which means that certain sounds like rain falling, yes, that whispering, that type of thing,
Very good at whispering, baby.
gives you tingles on the back of your neck and induces sleep.
If you
apparently.
whispered, not in my ear, but closer to my whisper.
I got.
It's a very strange thing because it works on some people and not others.
1,500 views on my whispering video.
And what's interesting to me about this is going from hardcore brothel work to doing the least bit possible to stimulate excitation or relaxation in people.
Very stimulating.
It is it is the inverse, reverse, perverse of actual sex work.
It's one of the most perverted mediums
and it doesn't work on everybody.
I've been able to discover openly in an open forum.
The first observation as a human being when you're in the womb is your hearing, and you're hearing all the fluids, and then you're hearing dad yelling at mom from the outside. It's the first connection with the senses is the hearing, and it's so primal, and it's so rooted into actually, and yet we dominate through sight. Our sight is our dominant sense.
And smell, and smell.
Yet our earliest sense. First sense is actually hearing.
I remember conversations when I was in the cradle
that
my parents had. I remember conversations verbatim.
Wow.
Now, I might have had a mental and moral blackout after that, but I remember.
I actually do believe that.
I remember complete conversation about card hands.
Way back. I mean, like stupid.
And I don't remember a lot between certain ages, but when you actually remember conversations in the cradle. So it's very interesting to me because I want to kind of start the opposite of that. Like, I want a channel that's just all shouting at people. How about that? That's what I base my whole fucking career on. I don't need to do it in the mic. That's what I do live. That's what I'm paid for. Well, this is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Zoe Hansen.
Going Down by Zoe Hansen. The streets were hot, stinking hot. Sticky cans and discarded food collected around full garbage cans, and the flies were feasting. I felt cold. Goosebumps stood out on my arms. I noticed blood spots on the sleeve of my white long-sleeved shirt. I rolled them up just enough to hide the blood while still covering the pit of my elbow. Sweat trickled down my back and made me squirm. A banged-up undercover cop car crawled past. The windows were rolled down and 2 fat cops were sucking air. I slowed down and stood under a torn awning so they wouldn't see me. One of them was that bastard who stopped me 2 nights ago on Rivington. On the street, they called him Flash. I didn't know if it was in reference to Flash the superhero or the Queen song. I hadn't copped yet. But Flash swore he'd seen me score. He pulled me into a stairwell to pat me down. I knew he wasn't allowed, but there was nothing I could do. I was lucky he didn't plant something and take me in. It's best to let the cops do whatever they're going to do. He felt me up and stuck his hands down my pants. I think he wanted me to resist, and the fact that I didn't really pissed him off. And he told me to go fuck off. Your mama, you looking for the good shit? A man with 1 eye and 1 leg steadied himself against a wall. He smiled a toothless grin. No, leave me alone, I said. With 1 eye, 1 leg, and no teeth, I wondered what else he had lost. If I had 1 eye, I'd wear a patch. You don't see too many girls with an eye patch. Walk down Avenue C. It's so quiet, and it's still daytime. Fiends weren't fiending yet. Houston Street. I saw a young hip-hop kid selling Roadrunner by the Parkside Lounge. Butterflies flipped in my gut as I neared the buzzing block. The seller was wearing a lot of gold and stood out way too much. I had $500 on me, which, when transferred into dope, should have been enough to get me through the weekend. But it never did. It's never enough. Money had lost all meaning to me. It had become various amounts of heroin, my new currency. $100 meant a bundle. 50, half a bundle. $10, a bag. $5, a pack of smokes, not even enough for a bag and therefore meaningless. An annoying little piece of paper, unless accompanied by another $5, which had meaning. That was a whole bag of heroin. A haggard street hooker stood in front of me in the dope line. She'd bought one bag. A nice-looking rock dude, the type I liked, pushed in front of me. "Yo, the lady was in front of you," the dealer said. Rock dude looked at me with hollow eyes and stepped back. Shame. Looked like a cool guy, minus the dope. "How many, mama?" 5 bundles. I got you. He smiled flirtatiously, then reached into his underwear and pulled out 5 bundles tightly wrapped in rubber bands. I traded money for heroin. Beautiful, beautiful. All's okay with the world. Now nothing could go wrong. I felt my security blanket tighten around me. "Thank you. Will you be here later?" Don't know why I always said that, but I always did. Walk quickly, quickly. Get off the block, off the block. Don't want to get stopped by the cops now. Hands deep in pockets, holding my lifeline. It felt so good to have the dope on me. It was the only time in my day that I could slow down and view the world I had long ago stepped out of. The sky, the blue, blue, cloudless sky, the people, the feelings. I felt powerful and safe at that moment. No one could touch me. Then a large, sweaty man appeared out of nowhere. "Lady, please, you got a few dollars? I gotta get straight." I looked at him like he was insane. I got mine, fuck him. Why would I give him money? That's some bullshit. I felt guilty at being so cold and mean. But everyone for themselves, right? I looked back and saw him watching me. He made me nervous and broke my momentary blissful view of the real world. I was brought back into my universe. I saw Marilyn walking with a young, thin, Hispanic male I didn't recognize. "Marilyn!" I yelled. Thank God, perfect timing. I could go over to her pad, get straight, instead of using the filthy bathrooms at Odessa restaurant. "Hey, baby, can I use your place?" She knew what I meant. "I was going to go to Tito's and get straight over there. You got a bag for me?" she said, smiling, linking arms and squeezing me. Tito walked ahead, not talking. He took his T-shirt off and mopped his brow with it. He had a rough jailhouse tattoo of Jesus crying on the cross in the middle of his back. I trusted Marilyn. She'd been out on these streets her entire life, and she knew everyone. Every dealer, hustler, whore, thief. In this disease of a life, Marilyn was a beam of sunshine. She was always smiling, even though she had little to smile about. She whored on Allen Street for $10 a pop and told me horrific tales of her life of abuse. Her ability to forgive and forget was astounding and unusual. She had asked me why I spoke with an accent. I told her I was from London, England. She asked where that was and if they spoke a different language there. We headed to 3rd Street between Avenue C and D. The south side of the street was an empty, open lot where a building used to be. It burnt down. Now children played on strewn rubble and junkies turned tricks on discarded mattresses. Tito pushed open the front door to the building. The lock was broken and the hall stunk of piss and garbage. He angrily kicked an empty can of beer down the hall. It rattled into a corner and made me jump. Did he really have to do that? Asshole. It was dark. The light bulb was blown. We followed him into the second floor to the back apartment. Graffiti, newspapers, scattered bits of broken everything were everywhere. A young man was standing in the corner, stooped over on the nod, with an unlit cigarette in one hand and a lighter in the other. "Wake up!" Tito bellowed into the man's face. The guy opened one eye, smiled a crooked smile, and went back to his dreams. Tito banged loudly on the door and put his ear against it. It clicked open, and we all filed past Tito's mother, who stood there in a house dress and curlers. She said she was going to the liquor store.
This is the Lydian Spin, featuring Lydia Lunch and myself, Tim Dahl, with the wonderful, beautiful, and positive Zoe Hansen.
Extremely talented writer about real life, true trauma. And the recovery, and not only recovery from it, not only the survival of it, but the striving to thrive. And that's what connects us, babe.
That does. No, thank you. And
because
thank you
we're
for
not,
that,
and look,
understanding it and getting it. Yeah.
And it does. And that's our endless struggle, is to not let trauma win again. Because it is a universal nightmare that goes on forever. And our rebellion is to not allow it, because we're stubborn, to stifle us.
Right.
Because it does stifle a lot of people. It actually it silences people. Trauma silences people.
Trauma makes people silence themselves. And I silenced myself for decades because of my pain and not knowing how to deal with my pain. And I felt throughout this past year that for me, I've always grown up in large cities like London and New York, where my distractions were enormous, and always leaving the front door would enable me to forget about my trauma. So sitting in
silence,
Los Angeles,
right,
and silence, and
in the suburbs of Los Angeles,
and not having anyone from my choice, because I was like sitting and thinking,
because you were preparing for the next phase. And people don't understand.
That's the growth.
This is the thing. You said a very key word, babe.
And the pain.
Silence.
Yeah.
People cannot stand to be quiet.
I had to.
They don't understand what it is to sit alone with yourself. That's why they're so distracted by the internet, and they can't not get off their phone, and they're on the internet, and they're watching everything. People don't understand. The most education you will ever get is sitting alone quietly by yourself. You better face yourself. That is where you get the greatest education. When you actually allow the distractions to fall away, all they are is preventive measures. It's false information. It's a bunch of bullshit that people consume in order to avoid themselves.
Right.
Same way some people overwork to avoid themselves. Anything but me alone, silently in a room. You know what I say? Please, me alone, silently in a room.
Right.
And that is really the life of a writer.
No,
and that's not for everybody. I mean, the life of a musician, look, composers sit alone and work a lot by themselves too. But it is a collective thing that when it comes to fruition. Right. A writer is still alone, whether you've written it, whether you perform it, whether it's published, whether you read it in front of an audience, they accept it or not. It's still a very onanistic thing. It's a very different, and so as this painting is, it's an isolationist practice.
And that's why we choose it.
But before the isolation comes the experiential. It comes all of the experience that lead up when you're
write about it unless you've experienced it.
And that's when you're a writer who deals in real life experiences, which is all the writing I'm concerned with.
I agree. Totally.
I mean, I don't fiction. I want memoirs. I will read.
But your fiction is based on life. I mean,
but I don't write fiction. I write real stories that are very slightly, hardly ever fictionalized. I've written maybe 3 fiction stories. Yeah. You've heard them all, babe.
Yeah.
The thing about the Coven is that it's almost like the equivalent of a circle jerk, but it's a poetry circle jerk.
It is.
We read to each other. It's very informative because women's voices have got to be heard, especially by other women, because it's just important.
It is, and supportive, and you grow through that. And you've given a lot of people platforms to be able to.
This is what the Lydian Spin is for: is to give people platforms and to expose people who are like me, stubbornly creative. And it's not only about me, and that's the thing. It's like It's not just about me. I knew from the very beginning my stories were not just about me. They weren't the worst, but they had to be told. And the more I told them, maybe the more a few other people would tell their stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have. And you've created
And here we are, and that's what we do. Now, what's next, my love? What do you want to do? What's next? I mean, now, see, you're entering into a new phase.
I do want to finish the book and get that to some.
And now that you're in another place, you will.
Something like I want some
because you might start at the end.
I also do want to. I do want to do the YouTube channel. Like I want to monetize that and do
the
what
fetishization of people's ability to be tingled by the subtleties.
So I need to work on that and being able to do that at home with a video camera and a microphone is great. So I'm going to do that and the right creativity. It's everything. It's
the thing is, we live
create.
Our life as an act of art. Artist is an understatement. The way that we have to live is an act of art.
It is.
Because that's what we do.
That's it, exactly.
And the thing is, life is what you make it. And, it can be as terrible as you want it to be or as good as you want it to be. And it's all a matter of perspective. In my work, concentrate a lot on the negativity of the bullshit of the patriarchy and mania. In my private life, I'm laughing hysterically like a fucking lunatic. Right. My rebellion is pleasure like yours is. And it's really all in perspective. And there comes a point where after especially you've suffered, you got to turn that around and say, you know what? So is everybody else. And ours is not the worst.
That's my thing. It's like, everyone's
ours is not the worst.
Shit,
and the thing is, the whole point of this life, and this is what I had to learn to do as a glutton, as a natural born glutton. When nothing is ever enough, you have to reduce everything to the most basic elemental, and you better appreciate everything. Because you know what? This is a pretty whacked out planet. Forget all the insanity of it. Look at the fucking beauty for a change, and that's what I love about Tim Dahl. He appreciates nature, and you know what? Nature is this planet. That we're killing it with our mod comms and our obsessive gluttony is one thing, but if you can't appreciate what there is around you, your eyes are not fucking open. And you know what? You've been blinded by stupidity. You have to appreciate the way light falls on a fucking rock. A squirrel, by the way.
Absolutely.
I did have a visitation today by Ruffy, the West Coast
You
Ruffy.
did?
You know, squirrels follow me wherever I go. It sounds ridiculous, but you have to find joy because the point of the enemy, whoever the enemy is to pound out of you pleasure so you become a robotatron so that you consume the bullshit they want you to buy because you will never be satisfied and you need the latest, newest everything that is there feeds into their pocket. Stop buying. You know what? Why don't you just
stop buying? They're just going to continue.
Shut up. Every dollar you spend, I like to say, you know, I hate to buy anything. You better know it's going into the enemy's pocket.
Well, it's not just this country. It's the world.
Everywhere, the world.
Well, the world's actually dependent on American consumption.
Absolutely.
The fucking glory, beauty, and pleasure. Beauty, I'm going to say this again. The glory, beauty, and pleasure that is free for the taking on this planet, which is like no other, is so immense that if you can't see that, you have been blinded by the ignorance that the fucking corporate whores want you to buy into the fact that you will never be satisfied by anything but more. You know what? Less is more. That was one of the first songs I ever wrote.
Different times, babe.
This is the Lydian Spin, Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Zoe Hansen. Thank you. If you have spare dollars, I'll take them.